The Wages of Fear is an edge-of-your-seat thriller, where two trucks carrying nitroglycerin across rough terrain could explode at any moment. Let's join these characters for the journey and see who makes it out on the other side. Welcome everyone to Collector's Cut, The Collection. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
Hola.
This is our monthly companion show to The Collector's Cut. This is a special monthly show where we only review movies from the Criterion Collection. And coming up on this episode, we are looking at 1953's The Wages of Fear, directed by Henri-Georges Clouzot. So we're going to get into it. We'll start spoiler free as we always do. We'll give you a warning before we go into spoilers. I was very excited to do this one. I'm a big fan. I saw this for the first time maybe, I don't know, about 13 years ago, give or take. Around 2010 sounds about right. Okay. So we'll get into it. It was later remade by William Friedkin, the director of The Exorcist, into a film called Sorcerer, which I only just discovered like a year ago because Tim just mentioned that he watched a movie called Sorcerer, and then he started describing the plot, and I went, wait a minute. This sounds oddly a lot like Wages of Fear, and it turned out it's just a remake with a really weird title that doesn't sound.
Also, apparently, based off of what I read, William Friedkin doesn't think it's a remake. Like, it clearly is, but he's like, nah, it's its own thing. Let it be its own thing.
He is, dare I say, full of shit.
Mm-hmm. There was also a 1958 remake that actually owned up to it called Violent Road.
Oh, really? I didn't know about that one. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So, I mean, the basic premise of Wages of Fear is very simple. It is the story of four men who are poor, who are struggling for money, who accept a very dangerous job of transporting nitroglycerin in two trucks across country terrain and rocky terrain in South America. There's a lot of reasons why. We'll get into all that later, but that's the basic principle, is that it's four men driving very unstable substances that could blow up at any time, and they have to try and navigate. And of course, along the way, there are obstacles. There are, maybe a bit of rough road that might cause an explosion. There might be, just things along the way. We'll get into all, of course, the details later, but that is the basic premise. It's very simple. It's very easy to just pitch to someone. It's kind of weird because obviously it's a Criterion Collection film. It's a French film. It's a classic film. But it's also kind of just a simple high concept movie. You can really sum it up in what the appeal of it is in a very quick, succinct sentence. Mm-hmm. So that's it.
For me, this movie is that Hitchcock quote about the bomb under the table, but just the entire movie. It's just, that's all it is because it's not even the bomb is under the table. The bomb is in the back of the car. Everyone knows there's a bomb, and they all have to just deal with it.
Absolutely. It's so simple and effective. It's one of those things where I didn't know the premise of this movie when I started watching it.
Same.
Like, I literally just sat down. I think in 2010 I bought a multi-region Blu-ray player purely for the purposes of buying Blu-rays from the US from two companies. One was Criterion, the other was Scream Factory, who do like horror movie stuff. And they were all region locked, because not all Blu-rays are. Some Blu-rays, like Warner, Universal, they just have region free discs, so you can import them to your heart's content if you want to. But I wanted a region free player to watch those things, and for some reason the deal I got on a player from the site that sold it was that you could get 10 Blu-rays with it up to a value of X amount per Blu-ray. So I just got 10 Criterions. I'm milking this for everything it's worth, and this sounded like an interesting title. Criterions tend to have nice covers. I basically bought it just because it looked interesting from the cover, and it had good reviews.
It is a very well done cover. Yeah.
So I sat down to watch it, not knowing what the premise was. And there's a bit of build up. Don't get me wrong, but it's a 2.5 hour movie. It's about an hour before the plot really gets into the meat of it. There's a lot of introduction to the characters, and they're interesting enough characters. It's doing some good character building in that first hour. But once it hits that premise, and I'm like, that's what this movie is. This is exciting. Like, I'm just on the edge of my seat, like, now till the end of the movie. Like, this is really well done.
No, it's the same for me, is that I knew nothing about going in, not even genre. All I know is that it is well-regarded movie, obviously, because we're doing it on this show. But when it finally revealed itself to be a thriller, to be a suspense film, I was shocked at that first hour, because the first hour does nothing to suggest that that's the route we're going down. It is pure character development the whole way through. And then all of a sudden it's like, by the way, you're carrying bombs for the next 2 hours. And it's like, oh, all right, sure. That sounds like a good plot.
Yeah, pretty much. But I mean, obviously that first hour is very effective in like setting the characters up and making you understand them, possibly care about them. Obviously, I think you care about them certainly by the end of the movie, but like I think early on, yeah, they're not necessarily completely 100% nice people. They're not all instantly likable.
No,
they
not
have,
at all.
They have faults, you know, they fit into a system. And, you know, the last time we did Seven Samurai and we kept talking about how it had something to say and it was clearly had themes, so does this movie. This movie is about capitalism. This movie is about the exploitation of people. This movie is about, you know, the system, and it's about the exploitation, you know, all these things. It's, you know, they're doing this because they're poor, because they need the money, and, you know, lo and behold, the company behind everything they're doing is an American oil company. Like, you don't get much more blatantly, your messaging is very clear.
I mean, how more morally complex could they get with a villain? There's so much good and evil, not just 100% evil.
So, but you know, it presents these characters who are struggling, and I think by the end of the movie, it does say a lot of things and what these characters go through and what they're willing to do for money, because it's presented as a thing that we all should want and that we all need to live.
It's not even so much of a thing of exploitation. It's, I think the central focus of this movie, the central theme is not only how much is your life worth, but how much is your life worth with the idea that you can change your life as well. Like, how much is your freedom worth is the bigger option there. Because something at the very beginning of the movie they lay down is there is no way out of this town. This town is where dreams come to die. And it's not even so much that the characters need $2,000 to be able to, you know, pay rent or be able to pay off like a restaurant bill or something like that. It's all about getting out of this town and just starting a brand new life. Like, they don't want to continue their lives as they currently have. They want to completely stop them and start anew somewhere else.
Yeah, it's very much about I mean, they're not literally in America, but it's kind of the American dream. It's I want to start off with the better life, with the nice house and the pretty wife and all those things. And I think that's why the oil company being American kind of represents this, like, you know, this carrot on the stick, you know, which is where I'm getting the word exploitation from, is it very much feels like we're selling you this dream, but you have to put yourself at risk. And how often, you know, does it pop up in even modern news and like talking points of like modern culture of like the expectations of an employer and what you have to do to prove yourself worthy of a job, and the arguments that it should be more about like the company proving they're worth working for, not that you're worth hiring. You know, I feel like there's reports like every little while about how like younger generations just won't put up with shit anymore and they'll just quit.
Right now the big buzzword is quiet quitting, which as far as I can tell is just doing your assigned job and nothing more. And employers are saying that is a thing that's bad, that you're not going out of your way to make extra money for the company for no extra pay. I'm like, yeah, I get it. I absolutely agree, 100%.
with the quitters, I assume, yes?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I don't know. I'm wearing a suit and tie. I feel a little bit...
No, I mean, I think there's this culture thing where, like, a job is just a means to an end that we have to have, but we don't necessarily take this pride in, like, whatever job you have. There's no shame in it, but there's no, like, pride in it either.
But see, that's what I really appreciate about this movie, though, is because these guys, over the course of this movie, are put through absolute hell.
Yes.
But it's not a thing of, even if they stop, they'll still get paid. They have to complete this job, no matter what, to get that pay. And it then tears away that extra little level of going above and beyond. Their expectations have been set as this truck must arrive. You can take as long as you want, but this truck must arrive at this location. And because of that, there is no quiet quitting to this. There is no doing the bare minimum. The bare minimum is everything.
Which is obviously dangerous, and there's that. You know, it's hard not to think about, like, conscription a little bit. Not that I'm saying it's directly trying to like bring up war necessarily, but it's hard not to think about that a little bit. But there's also this idea that, you know, quite often the people who sign up for the military do so because they're poor and because there's benefits to signing up. And that's why these guys sign up, is because they're poor and they need the money. It's this like carrot on the stick, like I said. And when they do, obviously, you know, a lot of people sign up and some back out and they have to prove themselves worthy of doing the job. But like it's all very much, they're being presented this opportunity, and there's even a line from the guy, I think his name's O'Neill or O'Brien, who's running the company in the town.
Bill O'Brien.
And he says, we'll ask some of these bums to do it because they don't have unions. They can't sue us. They're not part of the system.
Yeah, they explicitly go out, and not only are they looking for capable drivers that they do have to prove themselves, but they explicitly say, no families, no unions.
Yeah.
Something where if they get hurt, we don't have to answer to anybody.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, there's obviously a good over setup, and then there's the actual adventure, the thriller adventure of this journey that takes up the last 90 minutes of the movie. And that stuff is pretty riveting. But I suppose just to ask you the question, since you hadn't seen this before, is David.
Yes.
What did you think of The Wages of Fear?
I do not have a lot of experience with French film. You know, those sort of the most I have is all the parody stuff where it's all super high contrast, black and white, of like a balloon floating in the summer sky. It's like, yeah, it's all but a high concept. But this one, for me, it felt approachable. At the very beginning of the movie, before I knew where we were going with it, I was concerned that it was just going to be like 2.5 hours in this rundown town, and it just sucks for everybody for the entire time, and there's no actual like plot to it. It's just the day in the life of these horror, like, people who have given up on life. But once we got into the actual plot itself, the moving this nitroglycerin across, it got me, is the best way I can describe it. I was sitting there multiple times, edge of my seat. I had that pit in my stomach all the way up until the very end of the movie, of something is going to go wrong, and repeatedly, of course, it did. So it's selling me for its thriller movie, a movie that was just building suspense. It 100% succeeded for me. I definitely did get a kick out of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just very solid. There's these 4 characters that are set up, and like I think every problem they encounter is so simple to understand, and it's so simple to get into the dynamics of. And it's one of those things where when we were reviewing the Fast and the Furious movies not too long ago, we kept talking about how we didn't necessarily understand during the tense moments of the racing what exactly the drama was of like what they were doing to try and gain an edge, because it wasn't presented in a way where it was like, oh, you know, cause especially when it was just a straight line, because it's all just down to who's like shifting gears at the right time and who's hitting their NOS button. But here it's like, no, okay, we've got this gravelly road. We've got 2 choices. Do we go really fast because that'll keep us steady, or we have to go super slow? Because if we go over like a couple of miles per hour but not fast enough, it's just going to be rocky. It's going to be bumpy and it's going to bounce around. You understand that it's simple. It's, you know.
For me, it goes all the way back to, I think it was like our 2nd or 3rd season, when we did the parody film of The Big Bus. Because that one was just, hey, drive this bus across this route, but then problems kept on springing up. And obviously that goes for, like, all those disaster movies have always been just how do we solve the problem, and then more problems get in the way. But this feels different from those, because those movies always felt like it was, I don't want to say Deus Ex, because it's not a good thing, it's a bad thing, but it always just felt like, oh yeah, no, it just comes up out of nowhere that there was like a broken tire or something like that. But this one, it all felt realistic. It all felt like whenever they encountered these problems, it was a thing of, no, this is just a thing that it would happen on this route. It's not something where God himself feels like he's stepping down and be like, no, you can't make it there. It feels like, no, it's, from what they've managed to show of this country, this town, this road in general, all of the obstacles they come across make sense. And it sells it just that little bit extra.
And sometimes it's the characters themselves who cause a problem, and those also feel somewhat believable in the situations, or it's an understandable knock-on effect of a choice they have made.
I'm pretty sure this movie would be a full hour shorter if the oil company had given them a pair of walkie-talkies. I think that would solve most issues.
But then again, it's it's 1953, and it's like a rundown, like, middle of nowhere town. Like, how common are walkie-talkies here? How expensive are they? And
I specifically looked up when was four-wheel drive invented, because that also would have solved many problems.
Was there an answer?
Yeah, it was like the 1890s. So
okay. That makes sense though when you think about it. It's literally just it's not really any more advanced than a regular car. It's just more power, effectively.
Yeah. Apparently they didn't get popular until the 90s though. So it's possible that's why they didn't have it on this.
Yeah, it wasn't a common thing to have. Maybe yeah. It's the sort of thing. Well, that's the thing they even mention in the movie though, that there should, to transport this stuff, you're supposed to have shock absorbent equipment. You're supposed to have special trucks. They don't have any of that. They do point out these are just regular trucks that we have sitting here. So they do make it kind of clear that we don't have a special equipment, and that would include, I assume, things like 4-wheel drive, if that even would have been an option commonly at the time.
For sure.
So no, it's all very good stuff. And even just the fact that it's an oil company as well just ties into the theme of money, because that's all you think about. Is you think greedy companies when you think oil. Yeah.
I do think I did mention that remake that it got, the Violent Road or whatever it was called, and that one apparently when they remade it, they changed it to rocket companies, and they were transporting rocket fuel across the mountain.
Okay.
And I feel like that loses something where it's something that's like completely optional and it's like doesn't have a lot of monetary input to. Yeah. I feel like having it be an oil company, this thing that the entire world at this point needs, is just that little bit of extra capitalism thrown on top of it.
Especially in this time period. This is before a lot of the other options were around or commonplace, at least. So, yeah. And plus, rocket fuel just sounds a bit more science fiction-y in a weird way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I know literally, if you're building rockets, they need fuel, but it just sounds like something less tangible for some reason than just nitroglycerin.
Yeah, that was my girlfriend is a nurse, and I was explaining the plot to her. I said, "Oh yeah, they're transporting nitroglycerin across," and she's like, "Okay, and apparently in nursing and medicine, nitroglycerin is used for like heart problems. That's the usefulness for that. I know it as an explosive, so I'm like, what do you mean, and?"
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that is it maybe like a slightly different mixture that's used in medicine?
I don't possibly. All I know is I went to the Wikipedia article for nitroglycerin. Section 1 in explosives, Section 2 in medicine. So it's at least extremely close.
Yeah, I'm just struggling to imagine that all these nurses and stuff across hospitals around the world are all got like tweezers, and they're all like carefully moving nitroglycerin. Like, I'm just assuming that it's maybe laced with something to make it less combustible.
I mean, I also think that this movie played up how combustible nitroglycerin actually is, because
I mean, it's a movie. It's still a movie after all.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But like, I watched a YouTube video of like, all right, let me just get a sense for how big of an explosion it would be if one of these trucks exploded. And the movie had them just a little pipette of nitroglycerin, they squirted it out, and then they hit it with a hammer, and then it exploded. And I'm like, okay, so it's not, if you got to hit it with a hammer, it's not that big of a deal.
Are you signing up to transport a bunch of this?
No,
a
not
truck?
at all.
No, you're not.
Never.
Because
I understand. No, I understand. They just had a tiny little eyedropper, and it exploded like that. I understand, but I'm saying that it takes a lot of force to make it happen, not just them bumping on a road.
But I mean, to be fair though, like sometimes when you're in a car, sometimes you'll just get that one nastier bump that you're not expecting, and it is a bit of a jolt. Like you hit that, and I feel like
it's right outside of my local McDonald's. I hit it every time.
And it's not even just always like something obvious like a pothole. Like sometimes it can just be a just natural bump. When you're. So I think the danger, if anything, the most unbelievable thing about it is that it didn't just like explode much quicker.
Yeah, the part that got me throughout this movie is like they are going so slow. They are barely creeping forward for a lot of this movie. And yet, whenever they exit the cab, they always slam the door shut. And I'm like, guys, just like gingerly close it, please. You're killing me.
But
here.
also constantly smoking in the truck, and I felt like that was also asking for trouble.
There is a sign on the back that says no smoking within 50 meters. And then when they... it's a spoiler, so I'll say it later, but just remind me that there is a thing that happens that, like, it's the worst.
But I mean, this is two Frenchmen, a German, and an Italian. So they're like not having none of that, no smoking nonsense.
Yeah,
especially in this time period. Yeah,
I feel like it also goes into the sake of the movie where the oil guy could tell him specifically like, "Hey, seriously though, no smoking," but he doesn't care. He doesn't care if they end up dying.
That fits into the themes. He's the corporate guy who doesn't give a shit about the people below him, kind of thing.
Absolutely.
It is worth mentioning. It is mostly French, but there is a little bilingual. There's the guy who runs the American company speaks in English most of the time. There's a bit of English here or there. I didn't notice if some of the other characters occasionally dipped into German or Italian. They probably did a little bit, but
I feel like I heard Spanish, but it's close enough to French. I might have just been mishearing that.
Well, they're also in South America, so I'm wondering if some of the locals maybe.
Yeah,
because Portuguese sounds a lot like Spanish. I think to my ears it does anyway.
No, yeah, it does.
So. Yeah, I could see that. So I think part of this is it's a morality tale. It's a lesson. It's kind of like a self-realization for the characters who are obsessed with getting money, and by the end, do any of them still feel like it was worth what they've put themselves through? And we won't get into it yet because obviously that's all spoiler talk.
Yeah.
But I think that's definitely a question that's raised, I think.
Yeah, I think that's really the purpose of the first hour of this movie, because obviously they could have gotten into it a lot faster than they did.
Oh, yeah.
It took a while for them to actually get to the point of the plot, but the first hour plus of this movie is to set up how each of these characters not only A, interact with each other, but B, how they present themselves, how they view the world. And the biggest one that comes in, he's kind of our new character, is
Joe.
Mr. Joe. And he is just the biggest, brashest hard ass. Like, he is the toughest guy you're ever going to meet. And it's only once he gets on this road, on this quest, that you start seeing the real him creep out. And it's this evolution of a character slowly over the course of it until you finally get to the end and you see who the real man underneath was. And that goes for almost all the characters in this movie.
Yeah. And you've also got just kind of... Because you were talking about how they present themselves, and it's one of these things where Joe especially feels like he wants to present himself like he has money, and he kind of does in that first part of it, even though he keeps talking about how he's about to run out, but he's still acting as if he's going to have money, and he's just looking for his next payday. Right. But he sticks out against the others because of that. But then you have a character like Luigi, who looks more like Mario, but he's Luigi.
But Mario's a different character.
The main guy's named Mario, the main one that we follow.
The moment that they exclusively said that the names Mario and Luigi were in this movie and that they know each other, I was like, okay, possibly the darkest Nintendo film of all time, but I'm not going to throw it under the bus for
it's
that.
worth mentioning, this is like 30 years before those characters existed, so... I think that's just a point that Luigi and Mario were common names, particularly for, well, I don't know if I'd associate Mario being common with a French character, because he's a French character, but Luigi's an Italian, and that's, you don't get much more Italian than the name Luigi.
Hello, my name is a fettuccine.
So, yeah, like... I love the movie. The movie's like it's rich in its characters. It sets up all of what they represent, who they are, and it puts them through these harsh turmoils. But the beautiful thing is, and like you said, if you did cut out like a lot of the first hour, and originally in the US it was cut about at least 20 minutes, but you could see how, because eventually there's like an explosion at this oil refinery, which is where they're traveling to in the whole like second half of the movie. You could literally start the movie with them hearing about that, and like just sort of like do a little quick introduction to the characters and then get them going and just sort of learn about them on the road. You could have done that, but there's a clear choice in this movie to know we're going to spend 45 minutes plus getting to know these characters, their situation, how they interact, setting up friendships that are going to fall apart, setting up rivalries that are going to turn into friendships, things like that make that last hour and a half a lot more richer. So I think it absolutely serves its place and why it's there. But yeah. I think it's probably a thing where maybe it does help if you know going in what it's ultimately going to become, because you'll be like, okay, right, I know what the big plot idea is. It's just it's taking its time getting there.
Yeah, I think even once the big moment of this oil well catches on fire, it takes another probably 10-15 minutes before they explicitly say, all right, we're going to carry nitroglycerin over these mountains and you guys are like going to have to do it. That's where it sets up the, okay, it's a tense thing. It's not a social class thing. It's not a how is this town able to survive without money thing. It's a tension suspense film. I
think what helps about it though is that because there's not really any like tension before. I mean, there's like sort of minor character drama tension, but there's no tension before then. There's a moment when they're just filling up the trucks, and one guy kind of almost trips as he's carrying one of the canisters, and everyone just goes quiet, and there's no music. It's just quiet. And that moment, I think, lands so much because up until that point, there is no danger. There's no possible there's even a scene where someone's holding a gun up to someone, and it doesn't even feel like there's that much tension because you don't really believe the characters are going to do it.
Yeah.
But as soon as this moment hits, it's like, oh shit, like, like they almost all die.
Yeah, and going off of what you said on there's no music or anything, this movie does fantastically at letting the suspenseful moments just be dead silent or just like the character breathing, and that's all you hear, and it elevates it so much.
Absolutely, it's phenomenally directed, and I saw Sorcerer for the first time last year, the Friedkin version. Even if he denies that it is a version, it is. There's some differences. Like in that movie, like it starts with all the at least some of the characters before they get to this town, where we see what makes them end up there. So it gives them a bit more backstory. And some of the things they encounter are a bit more over the top. Where I was saying that in this, like, it's almost hard to believe that it's not just blown up already at some points.
Right.
That movie takes it even further. They have to go across like a rope bridge at one point, and it's like shaking all over the place. Like there's a storm happening. Like they're going through the jungle.
And then there's an earthquake, and then there's
Which, don't get me wrong,
see,
it was still solid. It was still a fun movie, don't get me wrong.
Right, but see, that's the sort of stuff that I'm talking about where it feels like God himself does not want you to complete this mission. It feels like this movie takes it back, where it's, okay, no, these are things that are just, for anybody else, minor inconveniences and slight annoyances. But it's only because of the situation that they're in that it becomes this insurmountable task that they somehow manage to find a way around anyway.
Yeah. It's like, this is not a problem until you're carrying a truck full of nitroglycerin, and all of a sudden, it's a scary situation. They never end up doing it in the movie, but they did bring up at one point of like, what if we get a flat tire? And for anybody else, that's like okay, you get a flat tire, whatever. But for them, that means that immediately one of their truck wheels is going to dip suddenly. And they have no solution to that at all. Yep. that's the answer to that. Yep. So I guess we'll give the spoiler warning now, so we can just sort of talk more freely, and get into some of the set piece moments in that back half, and maybe a bit more of the character setup. So spoilers for Wages of Fear from this point forth. So, one of the interesting things that it does from a character perspective, so it introduces is to Mario, who's our main guy. He's the one we follow more than anyone else. But it is definitely a foursome. It's definitely him, then Joe, then Luigi, and then Bimba, the German, is fourth. But even he still has a presence. You still remember him. He still he carries himself well enough.
Right.
He sticks out. He's got the blonde hair. And they're basically hanging around this saloon, and the owner keeps like beating them away because he doesn't want them because they're poor.
Specifically not Joe, though. He shows up later.
Not Joe, yeah. Joe's not there yet. Joe shows up in a plane, and he pays off I guess it's customs because it's a guy at a table, but it doesn't look like customs by any other standard because it's not an airport.
But it's a tiny little town. That's as much as custom needs to be.
And the airstrip's the only way in and out of the town, really, because the place is just surrounded by like desert and wilderness and shit like that. So it's just this little desert town. It's miserable. They're all hot. They're poor.
And it's the only reason this town exists at all is because of the oil mining company nearby. they need a place to have people live and pick up food and drinks and stuff, and this town is the only reason it's there.
And it's the only place that's employing anyone, really. Like, yeah, like this saloon has like, a couple of bartenders, but that's it. Like, there's no jobs going for anyone that doesn't already have one. So they're all poor and miserable, and you know they're a little bit of a chancer. You know, Mario is friendly with the girl who works at the bar, who passes him stuff occasionally.
You say friendly. She's friendly with him,
Sure.
and he seems to stand it. But for the most part, he seems to be very borderline abusive to her.
Well, I do actually think that ties into things, though, because he kind of exploits her for her help, but then casts her aside when she's not useful anymore. So it makes him obviously a bit unlikable. He's definitely a layered character in that sense. But he also just ditches, because it turns out that he's actually good friends. Mario was good friends with Luigi, right? That's a weird sentence to say because of the names. But he basically just ditches Luigi when Joe shows up because Joe looks like he has money and knows how to carry himself. He's basically latching himself onto Joe because he thinks Joe is like a ticket to a better life.
Yeah, and also they seem to bond over the fact that they're both Frenchmen.
Yes.
Because they whistle some tune that they both seem to know.
But he just like disregards his friend, and it creates this tension where Luigi feels disregarded and he doesn't like Joe. They have this sort of moment of tension inside the bar where they're going to fight. And Joe has this big sort of bravery sort of moment where he pulls out a gun, but then he hands it to Luigi and says, you know, go ahead. And Luigi's like, no, I'm not a murderer, which works in the sense that we then see Luigi as a sympathetic character because you know we can see that he's been like sort of wronged anyway, but also he's not willing to kill someone. So okay, he's got two likable qualities. But
also we had a scene where Luigi was at the doctor's office. And turns out he works as like a cement mixer or something like that. And he's gotten basically a death sentence. He's got cement in his lungs. And if he keeps working, he's going to die much sooner than he would otherwise. So he's looking for a ticket out of that career.
Yeah, because he was like the one of the four characters who actually had a job, really. But yeah, he's basically told if you keep working there, you're going to die. So he needs a way out as well. But you know, it sets up this tension between them all. And it's this idea that Mario attaches himself to Joe because he presents himself well and he thinks he's his ticket to a better life. But then when things actually get going later, as soon as they get on the road, and I mean, they never tell us this, but there's kind of an implication that Joe might have killed someone to get his spot on these trucks.
They have this. There's just a random explosion at the oil well. It goes off, and they need to extinguish it via a massive other explotion to just get rid of the flames.
A controlled explosion to sort of basically just like plummet the entire place. Yeah.
So the Americans at this company have a meeting. They want to get all the non-union people, as we said before, and a bunch of people from town show up, and all of them claim that they were truck drivers in their previous occupation. So they all have to basically audition by completing a little driving course. And there we do get one character who we were introduced to earlier named, I believe it was like Benjamin or something like that.
It's the old guy, yeah.
No, the young one.
The young one who's got a visa. He keeps saying they've got a visa, yeah.
He's already got a ticket out of there. He just needs an actual plane to take him to America. And nobody is willing to give it to him. His name is Bernardo. That's it.
There you go.
And he fails the driving test because the other guys are messing with him. And at the end of supposedly everybody taking their test, the top four are Mario, Luigi, the German who was named Bimba, and then another German who was part of their friend group named Smurloff.
He's the old guy.
Joe didn't even get selected for this. And we see that Joe and the leader of the oil company here are actually old friends back from, it seemed like they were talking about World War II, but I could be wrong in that regard.
I think they mentioned the 30s at one point as well, so maybe even pre-World War II.
Okay.
Yeah, no, because to set this up, and Joe basically, hey, why aren't you giving me this? And it's all, and basically O'Brien, the guy running this place, is like, look, you're an old guy now, right? You're in your late 50s or whatever it is. You're too old to do this. I would go myself, but I can't, and neither should you. And then, but Joe convinces him. But what if there's a spot opens up, and he's like, okay, fine. If someone drops out, if someone gets scared and leaves, the spot's yours. And then Joe just shows up when it's time to go, and the other guy doesn't. And they never even come back to it. But there's just like a feeling in the back of your head, he probably did something. He probably, if not killed him, he probably incapacitated him just so that he wouldn't make it to the...
Yeah, I kept on waiting for somebody at some point in a moment of frustration to call him out, to say, like, what did you do to our friend? Because they were all friends. They all hung out in the same place. They all talked to each other. I wanted there to be that moment where he was called out, but just never came up. And it does more to sell the toughness of Joe going into this trip than anything else up to that point.
Also
really.
the desperation as well. You know, I'd add that in there. And I think they actually set something up earlier as well, because there's a whole couple of scenes in the bar where the old guy who didn't show up, who Joe might have killed, wants the music on. He turns the radio on, or the old wireless that had been called back in the day. And Joe doesn't like it, and he asks to have it turned off. And it causes some tension where he keeps turning it off, and the old guy gets upset, and they all leave because the bartender's like catering to Joe because he has a little bit of money, and they all leave in sort of frustration. So it's almost a foreshadowing of later that he took the music away from him, but now he's taking this like opportunity to drive.
True. One thing I did want to point out here, and this is, I think, the most interesting part to me, is that the people who have lived there, the people who have been there for an extended period of time, they're desperate to have this job in order to get out. And Joe also wants the job in order to get out, but he's only been there for what seems to be days, if maybe weeks. And as we continue through this movie, we see that all the other guys just double down. They're saying, no, we can get there faster. We can like get this done if we do this. They're trying to get their money as quickly as possible because of how long they've been desperate to escape. It's only Joe who starts to crack.
Oh no, this is actually what I was getting to earlier before we pivoted into explaining the job.
Right.
Is that Joe, like, he has this tough guy demeanor. He's gun-ho about doing everything. He reaffirms his toughness and his like confidence multiple times. But instantly, as soon as they're on the road and he's in the truck, he starts showing these weird signs of wanting to delay things, of saying that he feels sick, of wanting to stop for a break and have something to eat, to the point where they're supposed to be half an hour ahead of the other truck. You know, they're meant to have a gap between them, so in case one blows up, they don't take the other one with them.
Yeah.
And the other truck that was meant to be behind ends up in front because he keeps stalling and delaying, and he keeps, like, every single time there's an obstacle, Joe keeps saying, we should give up. We can't do this because this will happen. He's this constant worrying character who's constantly making excuses. And I think what I was getting to when I was trying to get to this earlier is that, going back to the Luigi stuff, is that Mario has attached himself to Joe because he sees this guy who he'll improve my life. If I stick with him, he'll take me with him. He's better than Luigi. And all throughout the actual events that take place once they're in the trucks, Joe is this weight around his ankles. He's this problematic character who's just getting in the way. He's this negative force who's holding him back. And Luigi and Bimba, the German, who are in the other truck, they're problem solving. Luigi's thinking of solutions. He's proven his worth constantly. And the entire time, it's like, Mario, you deserve this. You ditched him for Joe, and it turns out Luigi is way more capable, way better at what he does, way smarter, and, you know, obviously they do eventually kind of reconcile lately on, but it very much feels like this comeuppance of, like, you try to screw someone over effectively in a friendship sense, and your comeuppance is you're stuck with this guy who you were banking on, who is not working out. He has turned out to be a coward, and he is being cowardly the entire time.
Right. And what I was going for, just to even take that a step further, is the fact that, yes, it is a comeuppance thing, but at the same point, the three guys who have lived there the longest, they know that there is no life in this town. They cannot continue to live in this town because they've been in it for so long. Whereas Joe is not at that point yet. He still values his life in whatever form that may be over freedom. And he's willing to completely skip this mission, stop this job, if it means that he can live even in this crappy town for just another day, week, month, however long it would be.
He's not tasted the poverty to the same extent. Right. Because that's the thing, is that he's still acting like he isn't in poverty, and he's just trying to, like, he's almost on the brink of getting into it. That's what it kind of feels like, but he's not actually had to live through it yet. And so like the others are all more desperate. They're all way more determined, and they are scared. It's not like they're not scared. Of course they're scared. Like, they're terrified. Anyone would be terrified. but
whenever it comes to the obstacles, they are always pushing through, no matter what. And we see in the end specifically how far the no matter what goes. And it's always a case of Joe backing down and saying, like, no, it's too much. It's like, I don't want to risk it. And it's that risk factor that everyone else is like, there is no greater hell than staying in that town for one more day. It is worth risking everything just to be able to get out of that.
And I think the other interesting sort of element to this is watching Mario change his demeanor as he's like realizing how much of a coward Joe is over the course of the last 90 minutes, because at first he's just like, oh, that's unlucky, you're maybe getting sick. And he's like, oh, let's go, we're stalling, let's go. By the time we get, like, another half hour into the movie, he is like so livid with him, and he's angry, and he's yelling at him whenever he tries to delay or whenever he tries to think of an excuse to stop doing things. It becomes this like contentious relationship, and it's really fascinating to watch. And again, because he latched onto him like he's like this new best friend as soon as he arrived. To see him completely flip is, I wouldn't quite say cathartic in a sense, but it's definitely bordering on it in a way, because you're seeing him kind of like realize the error of his ways and kind of come to appreciate his mistakes, I suppose.
Yes. However, I would add on there that at a certain point in this movie, it almost feels like he's being cruel to Joe, like past the point where it becomes acceptable.
No, absolutely.
So there's just this whole sine wave to it.
This is part of the critique of the system, I think, and the dog eat dog kind of world that is presented to us with capitalism, is that once he's a hindrance, he can't be kind anymore. He can't forgive. Now you're this obstacle, and I'm going to hate you for it. I'm going to hate you that you're holding me back. Rather than give him a pep talk, rather than try to like be nice and convince him, he is cruel. And he's just like he's cruel to the girl that he's kind of dating in the town. The way he throws her off the side of the truck when she's trying to like talk to him when he's leaving is like really dismissive, and he's kind of like that with Joe, but even more so because he's now mad at Joe for being this ball and chain, much like he saw the girls being a ball and chain holding him down. So it's definitely unlikable quality as well. Obviously the harsh lessons at the very end of the movie, kind of maybe finally make him sort of like contemplate like what this relationship has been with Joe.
Yeah,
but
because even then, at a certain point, I feel like there's a flip in Joe's personality to, yes, he's still afraid of death, but he, at a certain point, almost seems to like accept it. He's gotten to the point where he feels bad living with himself anymore at the very end of the movie, and he's just like, yeah, whatever happens gonna happen, who cares?
Yeah, he's still scared, but he stops being Weasley and just starts sort of
like sulking. Basically.
It takes a turn when you stop. Again, I wouldn't say I was ever enjoying him being scared necessarily, but it was an interesting character trait. But there's definitely, it takes a slightly sympathetic turn at a certain point where obviously he might have hurt someone to get this role. Obviously, it's easy to dislike him for being a showman and lying about who he is, and there's always some level of like someone who pretends to be a tough guy and then you find out they aren't. There is some level of like, well, you deserve the comeuppance for that, whatever it may be. But there's a certain point where it becomes so, scared, and I don't want to say pathetic, but like it's kind of in that realm where you're like, oh, I'm starting to feel kind of bad, and maybe Mario should try and like help
and
you.
Even
now.
then, you were saying there were rivalries that turned into friendships. I feel like that was the point where, like, Luigi started recognizing it, and he's like, "That guy's not okay, Mario. You might want to talk to him."
Yeah, that's
and,
a good point. Is
up.
Luigi's kind of the one that notices that, but yeah, they all get on. They're all hugging at a certain point because they solve a problem later. We'll get into what all the problems are in a minute. But yeah, I think that character, those breakdown of those two characters, and because I think a lot of this movie is about the dreams of achieving wealth and like what you'll do to get to it, who you'll step on to get who you'll align yourself with, but turn your back on the second they're not useful to you, kind of thing.
I'm not even sure that it's about achieving wealth. It's just escaping poverty. Like they $2,000 is what they would get for this. That doesn't, even in those days, that's not set for life money, but that is being able to get out of your current situation money.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, that's basically just all I mean when I say achieving wealth. I'm not saying they're going to be rich, but like they're trying to change their lives. But like again, but it all comes back to just this system that is exploitative, that is, you know, cruel, it is uncaring, it is unsympathetic, and it drives people to hunger for it, to want to double cross each other, to do all these things and put themselves in danger, and that's what the movie is.
I think that's best exemplified in the fact that multiple times throughout this movie, when the road is clear and there aren't any obstacles, Joe basically says, like, we should just go at 6 miles an hour. Like, just not even take any risks about it. We'll still get our money. And it's Mario who puts out there, no, that's going to take, like, full days to get done. Let's just floor it and hope for the best. And it's that idea of efficiency, even when it's not required. That capitalist idea of, like, the job can get done in whatever period of time it needs to take to get done. But there's this level of do it faster and maybe cut some corners. And as long as you still get it done, who really cares? Yeah.
And so to get into the various obstacles along the way that they're presented with, first up, obviously they're going through sort of, it can't be bamboo, I don't think, because we're in South America, but it looked kind of bamboo-esque.
I thought it was bamboo. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it's something else, but I thought it was a bamboo forest.
Maybe there is bamboo in South America. I just don't associate bamboo with South America. But this is where the other truck takes the lead, and there's not too much to this. This is just like the early signs of Joe acting up. The first big obstacle, I think, is that, okay, they're coming up on this road that's not as smooth, and they have this choice. Either we can go above 40, I think they said, because that'll keep us smooth enough, but we have to consistently stay above 40. So it's almost like speed. If we go below 40, it'll explode, kind of thing.
Right.
Or we can go slow, right? If we stay under, I think they said 6, then we're going slow enough that it won't bump around too much. And it's okay, simple rules. And the first truck in front, right, with Bimba and Luigi, they're going fast at first, but they actually do have like a bit of an engine trouble at a certain point, right, in the middle. So they have to stop and fix that. So they get out and they're fixing it. And they're like, yeah, but what if they're coming up behind us? What if they chose to go quick? They're trucking in the back. It's like, nah, they'd have been here by now. But when we actually cut to the other characters, like, they were going to go fast. Like, Mario wanted to speed up so they could go fast, but they were going too slow. And then because he wants to change it, they're actually slowly backing up so they can then speed up again to go fast. So effectively, the trouble we get into here is that the truck in front, because they had to stop, just have to go the rest of the way slow. So they're going 6 miles per hour. The truck in the back is now coming in at like 40 miles per hour.
Yep.
Simple. It's a simple, tense moment of like...
And the car in front can stop at any point. They have no problem stopping. But because this one in back is going 40 miles per hour, if they slam on the brakes, they're dead, no matter what. And they just need to make it past this stretch of road in order to then come to a more reasonable speed.
Yeah, and of course they can't just slow down gradually, because as they've pointed out multiple times, if they go in between those two speeds, it probably will be too bumpy. Yeah. So, yeah, there's this sort of tense moment where, like, oh god, we're about to hit them. But then, of course, they hit the part of the road where they can speed up again, so they start speed. Yeah, simple, effective.
Yeah, no, that was the first, because it even takes the time where Mario's like, we're gonna hit them in 10 seconds, and then he starts counting the seconds for the audience. He's like 1, 2, 3. He tells Joe not to close his eyes, and like you feel it. You feel that pit in your stomach. You know, at this point in the movie, they're not gonna die, because clearly we still have more of the movie left. But it's that tenseness, it's that suspense building up that you just, as a person, you feel it.
Yeah, and the big one after this is they're going up like a windy, like, sort of mountain road, and there's a turn that's far too sharp, and there's like a wooden sort of platform that's been built on the edge of this like turn to, I assume, just help facilitate cars and trucks getting around.
Yeah.
and they're like, shit, we're going to have to back it onto these wooden planks and then go up. And so we see it with the first truck first. So it's Luigi and it's Bimba, and they're problem solving. Like, okay, we have to go on the wooden planks. Luigi's outside, sort of directing them and sort of pointing. And there is like a little squeaky bum time moment where a couple of the wooden planks like break because they're rotten and they're kind of soft. And it's like, okay, we've just dealt with this. We've sort of figured it out. But they do sort of say, okay, but what about the truck coming up behind us? They're in a bigger truck, and we've made a hole. So what are they going to do? And sure enough, when the second truck comes up with Mario and Joe, they get up there and Joe's like, we should just throw in the towel. We can't go into this. It's because he puts like a knife into the wood and it just sinks in, and he's like, nah, it's the wood's rotten. We have to go. And Mario's like, no. We can just back up right up to the edge. And he goes to the edge, and there's a whole scare where it looks like Joe might have like been hit off the edge, but he's actually just trying to run away because he catches him. After like a minute of looking, he looks up and Joe's just like quietly sneaking up some rocks, trying to hide.
So I think this is the turning point for Mario, where he sees Joe actually trying to escape.
Yeah.
Like, not just delay, completely leave entirely. This is the point where Mario is like, nah, screw you, man. I'm done. I'm going to get this done with or without you. But I also think that Mario was already down that path, because he tells Joe, hey, get out back and tell me when I'm near the edge. And Joe's telling him like, hey, slow down, take it easy, don't go too fast. And he seemingly does push him over the edge. Like, we find out later he escapes, but that's not because Mario was going too slow.
Yeah. It definitely feels like they're not communicating very well. This was the moment where I kind of really started to think about like Mario in this predicament because he's like broken his friendship with Luigi. Because we saw Luigi and Bimba working together as a team. They figured it out, and the biggest obstacle here is not even the hole in the planks. That's kind of easy to just sort of like avoid. The problem here is that they're not communicating, and specifically Joe doesn't want to even help, and he's kind of forced to help and then tries to run away. Like, the problem here is that the partner's just not there. It's not a two-man job this time. And of course the ultimate thing here that almost kills him, doesn't quite, but as he's like driving back off the wooden platform, because he's right up at the edge, which they've clarified that he's right up at the edge, the little hook in the side of the truck catches one of the cables holding up the platform, and when he pulls it, the entire thing just buckles, and it buckles like right behind the truck. So it's like he gets out and he looks at just all these wooden planks that have all just went to plummeting to the bottom of the hill, and he's like, shit.
I thought it was, for a fraction of a second, it was oh dear God, good thing I made it. And then immediately switched over to, I would have made it a lot easier if Joe had been helping me.
Well, that's the thing, because he drives past Joe as if he's not going to like let him in and pick him up, and it's just to scare him. He lets him in after a couple of minutes, but it's to make a point of like, you prick, like you have to start helping and like pulling your weight here, or we're going to have trouble. So is it the Rock next after this? The big Rock?
Yes. Yeah. We run into Dwayne Johnson.
Not that Rock. A Rock. Yeah, so there's basically the truck in front is going down a road, and they're in fairly good spirits, but they encounter a big giant boulder that's like came off like hills nearby, and it's blocking the road. And they get out and they're like, shit, what do we do about this? How do we deal with this? And very quickly, Bimba's sort of looking over at the truck, and he's like, we blow it up. we have one resource at our disposal.
I do like that they did explore other options first. Like Luigi's like, oh, well, we could use the crowbar. We could pry it up. And it's like, nah, we don't have that much muscle. There's not going to be able to do that. And it only takes like a minute and a half. But Bimba is just like, we have one option. This is it. And we have a lot of that one option to use. Yeah.
And obviously, eventually, the second truck pulls up behind them and is like, okay, what's going on? And it's like, we're going to blow it up. And so immediately Mario starts helping. Like, they all start having jobs, backing up the trucks, getting things ready, lighting the fuse, all the rest of it.
I think Bimba has the hardest job out of all of that. Like, the most terrifying one.
He's the one pouring the nitroglycerin into this hole in the rock.
Yeah.
But there's this great moment just before, like, they've already lit the fuse, and someone says, hey, it should have been we back the trucks up further because this might blow rocks this way. And they're like, shit. So there's literally a moment after it blows up where it's just some small rocks just sort of rain around the nitroglycerin, and you're like, oh shit. If just one of them bumps it too much.
Bimba and Mario have taken to hiding in the hills. Luigi went to go stop the fuse from going off, but Joe is left just sitting in the passenger seat. And that's where I start feeling that, like, idea that he doesn't care at this point if he dies. It's better than living in that fear constantly.
I don't know if it's so much that he doesn't care. I think it's just so much, it's kind of like, it's turned into less cowardice and try to run away and more just, he's just so scared that he can't even, like
move,
try anymore.
can't even bother.
Yeah. Like, it's kind of, he's sort of become like he'll just,
because he still closes his eyes. He still winces as the rocks are falling down around him. So he is still scared, but he doesn't try to move. He just...
It kind of feels like at this point forward in the movie, he's just kind of given in to just being, like, subservient to Mario. Yeah. Like, he can't
he's
resist
just the
him anymore.
butt monkey now.
Yeah.
He's just... Whatever Mario says, if he wants to verbally abuse him, and he used to be the top dog compared to Mario.
Yeah, and it's at this point, right before it blows up, where Luigi's like, what's wrong with him? Like, he's like saying to Mario, hey, like...
It's also worth noting that at this point, they play for a second that Luigi died.
Yes, he's on the ground, but he's fine.
Like, yeah, but like he runs towards this explosion saying he's going to stop the fuse. This huge explosion goes off with rocks raining down everywhere. And then Luigi's just taking a nap, I guess, in the middle of the street. Like, he collapses because of it.
I assume he ducked for cover.
I guess. But even then, everyone comes up around him. They're like, is he dead? And he's like, his face is already moving at that point. He's clearly awake.
Yeah.
I feel like he could at least be like, I'm good.
They're not doctors.
Don't worry about it.
They don't know.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah, I mean, I think, because they all hug after this. Not Joe, but the other three are all hugging, and they all take a piss in the crater that they've just made. To christen it, and they don't invite him. He's kind of the left one out. He's not one of them.
I get it. I understand. The emotional beat plays. Yeah. I understand. But if I were in Joe's place, I wouldn't feel left out. I wasn't invited to the group pissing section. Like, and even then, he's not even just like, okay, I guess I'm not invited. He's like, well, I'll have my own pissing session with blackjack and hookers.
I think, obviously, from a typical writing perspective, it's also quite smart that the tragedy's about to hit. It's right after three of them have been at their happiest, where they feel like they've solved a couple of big problems at this point. They're getting through it. They feel like they're going to get through this and get paid. They're in good spirits. And I do love how suddenly the truck in front just blows up. And we don't see why. We don't see what bump causes it. And we just see it from the perspective of Mario and Joe in their truck. There's a bright flash. They look up and we just see this, the smoke from the explosion. That's it.
It's done beautifully because they have a conversation with Luigi and Bimba first, where it's okay. They're just shaving or something like that. Bimba's just shaving his face.
It's very casual. Yeah,
very casual. And then they cut over to the car with Mario and Joe in it, and Joe offers up a smoke to Mario. He starts rolling it. And they're just mid-line. They're mid-sentence to each other. And all of a sudden, all of the tobacco on the rolling paper just flies off, bright flash of light, and the entire mood changes in an instant as they see this explosion cloud up ahead.
I think this was the first Clouzot film I saw, and I think it's moments like this where I'm like, okay, this guy's a director. Like, this guy knows how to play all the moments. He knows how to capture the suspense, the tone shifts, the drama, like... Everything was so, I instantly wanted to see more of his movies as a result, and I'm sure we'll get to another one of his.
Oh, absolutely.
Probably in about 6 months, give or take.
Yeah, roundabout.
So, no, like, this moment just lands so well, and I love that the next big obstacle, probably the final big real obstacle of the movie, is what's created because of the explosion. Like, because this explosion has happened, we see a lot of trees have been cleared when they get to that point in the road, and that makes sense. But one of the big things is that along this way, and this was set up earlier, because this oil company's here, they literally have an oil pipe going this entire way. We don't see it the most of the time, but it's there. And part of this, the damage this explosion's caused is that the pipe is burst, and there's literally just like little sputterings of oil coming out every few seconds, and it's creating a pool of oil in the middle of the road.
Because they also formed a crater with their explosion that's several feet deep.
Of course. So they have to drive the truck through the oil, and he makes Joe go in and start moving branches out the way, and Joe's getting covered in oil to the point where he's eventually swimming. And they make it very clear that if this truck stops when it's in this oil pit, it's not starting again. They have to keep going.
Yep. And I throughout this entire movie, they've always laid down the rules right before the obstacle. They've always laid down, here is what needs to happen. When they were on the washboard road, they were like, we need to keep this speed and not stop for any reason whatsoever.
And I want to make it clear here, I don't care how completely accurate or inaccurate these details are. It doesn't matter. The movie makes it clear what the movie's rules are and then adheres to them. Yeah,
absolutely. And they've done that for each of the obstacles. So it's once they lay down at this point that the only rule in this entire thing is you cannot stop, that you know something horrible is about to happen.
Yep. So Mario's driving the truck. Luigi's trying to move branch up and he gets kind of stuck and he starts begging, stop, don't. And he's literally there. And obviously it's all under the oil, so you don't really see what's happening. It's all just him screaming. But he's kind of like, his head's just sort of dipping out of the oil at this point. So he looks kind of like really, it's a really surreal image of him like just like completely submerged in this oil.
Yeah. I don't know what they used for the oil, possibly actual oil, but it's effective. It really sells it.
And he still actually gets stuck. The truck still gets stuck sort of like almost out of the pit. Like it's just not starting now. And he can't. And eventually he uses like rope to like help pull it out and stuff. But when he drags Mario out of the truck after he's ran over, it looks like he ran over his leg and that turns out to be the case. But when he pulls him out, I actually wasn't expecting it to be as graphic.
Yeah.
You know, it's very clear. You see like his foot dangling in the wrong direction when he pulls him out of the oil. And he's screaming in pain. Like, much like the tone shift when the explosion happens, or much like that first time when they're just loading the trucks and that first moment of tension where the nitro maybe was going to be dropped and everyone has like a little, pause your breath moment.
Yeah.
This moment with him screaming in pain as his foot's dangling off, like, it's a complete, again, just tone shift of like, it's no longer a threat of danger with a possibility of a sudden thing happening. Now it's Mario's hearing screams, but he's determined to fight through anyway because it's still about achieving what he started. It's still about getting to the money. It's still about getting out of poverty, and it's about the desperation that poor people have. And he literally ran over someone who was supposed to be his friend. Regardless of how rocky the relationship's been the last day or two, he ran over his friend literally to get money here.
Yeah. And that's you see it on his face as well. But then I love what happens immediately afterwards is that he closes his eyes as he's doing it. The truck still ends up getting caught. It doesn't make it through the pit first time through. And he gets out of the truck and he just starts berating Joe. He's like, you knew I couldn't stop. You knew that I had to keep going. You were the one who got in my way. And like you said, there's just that paratext to it of the capitalist way of life, of anything that gets in your way that slows you down just needs to be taken out entirely. But this is the moment where then Mario shifts away, where he realizes like, look, I still have to do this, but I'm not just going to leave you here for dead. I am going to attempt to take care of you.
What's so effective about that moment as well, though, because you sort of mentioned it quickly there, is that there's a moment where he actually goes over him, where he closes his eyes, because it's clear that it gets to him for a second, where he's like, what am I doing? I'm running over his leg right now. I might be killing him. And it hits him. And then, of course, he goes into his angry rant after. And it's almost like the adrenaline puts him into that mode to try and sort of like absolve himself from guilt. He has to sort of blame him and say, this is your fault. I can't blame myself because that's too much for my psyche to take. I have to blame you.
This is trauma on both sides.
So, he's lying there with his foot dangling off, yelling to try and get out quickly so they can get somewhere. And the cover of the movie on the Blu-ray and stuff is actually the shot of like Joe just leaning against Mario's shoulder when they're both like filthy, covered in oil in the truck in this last stretch. And that's part of the movie, is that Mario just like, he talks about life, where he grew up and stuff, and then ultimately just dies. He dies next to
Joe does.
So Joe does, sorry, not Mario. Yeah, Joe's dying. From blood loss, and he talks about how he can smell like his like leg rotting from the.
Yeah, I mean, you get run over by a car, that sucks. That's hard and that's bad. If you get that wound covered in crude oil, I don't think you got that long after that.
No, no.
that seems like a pretty bad death sentence, sir.
And it's not like a nice quick death either. This is something where, I mean, obviously we don't get a good sense of the exact amount of time, but it probably took like an hour to get the truck out that oil. Like the way, because he had to like hammer in the poles, tie the rope. He was trying to, he had to duck under the oil. It feels like it's probably at least an hour since he got his foot run over by the time he dies. Probably more than that because it's dark, I think, by this point.
And the thing that got me the most is just how tragic his death is, because they make the point of them talking and Joe's going in and out of consciousness. And he, in his delirium or whatever, he asks Mario, like, what was on the other side of that fence? Referencing an earlier thing they talked about. And Mario just says nothing. Nothing is on the other side. And you could tell that, like, that's the last thing Joe hears, is like, there's nothing waiting for you.
I could also maybe, it kind of maybe fills in again for this idea of chasing the money. Is like, on the other side of that money, you're still going to be sad probably, especially after you've been through this. It doesn't necessarily fix all your problems. It doesn't fix your happiness. It fixes maybe your simple needs, like, needing to eat, needing shelter, things like that. But it's not necessarily going to fix, like, how you feel.
There's bigger issues, especially because this is I think the first moment that Joe truly felt the desperation that all of the other men have felt. But it's only in his last moments. He knows there is no life beyond this.
I think the tragedy of this as well is that the movie presents you this character who's a bit of an asshole, and then he's a coward, and I think it does such a good job with this last portion that even after all that, it gets to a point where you're like, he doesn't deserve this. Like, he deserves something, but he does not deserve this, because he's fundamentally just a part of the system that he's in, and he's been trained his whole life to want a certain thing and to go about it a certain way. He doesn't deserve this horrible ending. And no. The movie, of course, does not have this super happy ending. Like, I actually forgot how it ended, because I thought, is it going to end with just, Mario arrives at this oil refinery, the fire's still happening, because that's what they're still trying to put out this fire, right? So they're still trying. That's what they're going to use the explosives for. But he gets out.
I do want to point out, it's worth noting, Joe dies right at the outside perimeter of this.
Yeah, it's
place.
like a minute before he goes in. Yeah,
he just doesn't make it there, just by like 10 seconds. And Mario parks the truck. He weeps for his friend, and then he goes in with all the glycerin.
And he gets out of the truck, and he just kind of stumbles and falls over eventually. A couple, some of the people talk to him and whatever, but he walks.
Can I just jump in? This is the point where he gets out of the truck, and people who work there at this blazing oil refinery give him a cigarette to smoke right next to the sign that says no smoking within 50 meters. And the fact that even the oil company's just like, yeah, no, whatever, man. You made it. Good job.
But he like, I didn't remember the final scene, so I thought, this might literally end with him walking, because he's walking towards like the fire, so there's this like plume of fire and smoke, and it's this great like cinematic visual. It's almost like he doesn't care about the fact that he's getting the money. He stumbles and he falls down, and I thought, does the movie end here? Because I couldn't remember. But there's this one final little bit that is like, on one hand, I almost felt like, is this a dream sequence, because it seems too happy? But then, of course, it ends in such tragedy and irony that I'm like, nah, this happened. This definitely happened. It's almost like he's convinced himself he's happy, because he gets Joe's share of the money, so he actually gets $4,000, which, 1953 money, pretty good, right? He's
a quick check. Let me see how much it's worth. Go ahead.
I'm going to guess like 25 grand in today's money, which I wouldn't say no to.
1953 inflation. Well, it's $1,000 worth of money in, 1,000% inflation. So $4,000 would be $44,000 today.
Oh, even better.
Yeah,
I'll take it. Anyway, so we have this final thing where he's presented himself as quite happy. We actually cut back to the original town, and the girl's happy that he survived. They're all dancing and cheering because he's going to be coming back with some money, and it's all very happy to the point where you're like, I don't know about this. And one of the things to set up early on is that Mario has this old ticket. It's like the bus ticket or whatever he had to get here in the first place. And he's kind of kept it, and it's been this kind of symbol of he wants to leave. and he's driving the truck back, and he's basically driving recklessly because he doesn't have nitroglycerin. So he's enjoying the fact that he can swerve from side to side, and he's.
I was gonna say you're not selling recklessly quite enough.
Yeah, no, he's being careless. He's being. It's it's again we can talk about what this symbolizes. This idea that when he thinks he's safe, he is just reckless, and he doesn't take anything. It's the polar opposite of when Joe was being overly safe with the nitroglycerin before. He is now being recklessly unsafe because he thinks there's no danger. And sure enough, he ends up just going over the edge of the cliff road and falling to his death. And that's the end of it. The movie is depressing. Like, he doesn't even get out of it with his winnings.
It is such, and that's the part that I really want to sell, is that this movie did a great job of every time they were building up the suspense scenes of something big is happening, they always used very rapid cuts. They always showed very fast, like as they're about to collide into the back of the truck that's coming up in front of them, they very rapidly cut to each of the different drivers and how far away they were. And so it's set in your mind this little subconscious idea of the faster the cut, the more danger they're in. So as they're doing this scene where they're cutting between the people dancing and him driving this truck, the cuts start probably like a good 2 seconds apart from each other, pretty slow. And they just slowly pick up. It like feeling like a train engine. Like it just slowly starts getting faster and faster and faster until you're getting a cut every like quarter second. And then finally he goes off the rails. And you just knew as soon as he started driving and as soon as they started cutting faster, that pit in your stomach, you know it's not going to work. You don't know how it's not going to work, but something's going to go horribly wrong here.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, obviously there's the idea that it's just... It's this sad sort of reality of, like, even if you, like, you go through all the turmoil to achieve the thing you were setting out, which in this case was just to try and get out of poverty, and then, fate just takes it from you anyway. And don't get me wrong, it's partly his own fault for the way he's acting, but...
Yeah. If I could posit my little hypothetical meaning on it, is that I think this is a critique on the fact that capitalism punishes people who don't work. Even if you've succeeded, even if you have managed to get to a point where you think you're okay, if you don't work at it, if you don't constantly keep on providing something, it immediately tears it away from you. That, of course, excepting when you're up in like the 1%, you got your own safety measures. But for the average worker, even when you have like your retirement fund, all it takes is like one downturn in the market and oops, sorry, we spent it all.
Yeah, no, I see what you're saying. It's this idea that like he thinks it's over and he's out of it now, but the fight never stops. Like you have to keep fighting effectively and keep working and keep making money because so yeah, it's just symbolic of like he thinks he's done, but no, as soon as he thinks he's done and he gives up and thinks he can relax, that's it. You're gone.
Yep. As soon as you get retired, well, you are no longer part of the system. You're no longer contributing to it. So you now have to be on your guard because the system will come after you to get you back.
Yeah. I mean, obviously it's a film that's very critical of the system, through and through.
Which I do want to point out that you mentioned at the very beginning, the 20 minutes that were cut from the US were specifically the parts that were critiquing the oil company because it was anti-American at the time. Which, how does this movie even function without that?
Yeah, that's baffling. I could see how you could maybe cut down some of the character stuff. I wouldn't do it. I would say you shouldn't, but I can at least see how it would still function. But that's such an important part of the themes. Like the oil company doesn't care about the workers' lives. There's even like a moment, like see when the explosion happens and they're still like getting the first reports of the dead and stuff. There's a line where he's talking about like not telling one of their mothers or something for a while. Yeah, it's so inhumane and so.
He's wounded, and he says, "Call her back if he dies, and we'll deal with it then."
Call her back if she dies.
Yep. And it is worth noting, I brought him up, and I never quite gave a conclusion. Bernardo, when he isn't picked to become a driver, we see the girlfriend of Mario go out into the garden to pray for his safety. She looks up in the tree. He's hung himself because his visa is about to expire, and he had no way to escape. So... they exclusively say that was the first victim of
Well,
O'Brien.
I was just going to mention that. The guy who says that, we've not even talked to, because he's not really got a lot, but the one thing that's notable about him, other than that line where he says that's O'Brien's first victim, is that he's chosen to be a driver, and then he backs out because when he hears what the job is, he says, no, because even if you make it through this, you're going to like be a nervous wreck for the rest of your life. This is like coming back from World War One or something like that. This is, you know, he talks about this being, you know, he doesn't say post-traumatic stress because they probably didn't have that phrase yet, but that's effectively what he's talking about. He's saying that you'll be changed forever. It's not worth this.
They even specifically call out Joe during his first little cowardice stuff, whether he has the jitters. And I think the jitters may be what they called PTSD back then.
Yeah,
just having this nervous shake to you.
Well, I think in the war it was specifically called shell shocked, but that kind of stuff. So, yeah, like those like things are all set up to like sort of paint like what this is, and it doesn't. In no way, shape, or form does that last 90 minutes of the 2-hour movie like not live up to the build up of like, no, this is going to change you. You're going to be a wreck after this if you make it. And sure enough, like, you know, Mario is a wreck, and then he sort of pretends he isn't. And that's like the end of him.
Yeah.
You know?
And it's not even like when we describe it, we say, yeah, he careens off this cliff and the movie ends. But like, it's a hard cut. And of course, movies back then always had the credits front loaded more often than not. So all you get is this siren on the truck he's taking, whining out, his dead body there, and it just says Finn, and that's it. It's a hard ending it leaves you with no sort of time to emotionally come down from it.
And you literally just saw everyone in town excited and dancing that he's coming back with money, and they're never going to see him. So it doesn't even give you like their sad reaction. It just, you have to leave the movie knowing they're never going to see him. They're never going to get that happy ending.
Like we did John Wick 4, and spoiler alert for the end of John Wick 4, but like there's the graveyard scene. We get that moment of the other characters saying, hey, this is something we cared about. This is someone we cared about. And they give you that moment, that coda, to take the time as an audience to come down from it. This movie, nah. Because I also think that was a point he was making, is that all throughout this movie, these characters died suddenly. It was an explosion, and it is over in a flash. Like, all of a sudden you're here, and then boom, you're not. And I think that was kind of the point that was going for here, of like, yeah, his life ended, and that's it. You don't get the outward perspective of it.
Do you think there's also a little bit of symbolism that the town he hated and wanted to get out of is the only place that's going to care that he's dead? Like, these people that are dancing and expecting him are going to be sad that he's dead. They're the only people that's going to care about him. That's the place he wanted to leave. Like, the company that he was getting money from, they're not going to give a shit. They're not going to know or care.
I wonder how much the town is happy he's returning, or how much they are celebrating that he's going to be the one who actually gets away. Like, he was successful, and he's actually managed to get a ticket out of here.
I mean, I think he's coming back, yeah. Because he's on that road back, and I think, at the very least, I think the girl's happy that he's coming back.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm sure he would stop back and all that, but I just wonder, like, the town itself, were they all dancing because he managed to survive, and he's coming back home, or he managed to survive, and he's able to leave?
Nah, true. Or maybe they're even hoping that he'll take a few with them, you know?
Yeah.
Again, much the way he latched on to Joe, maybe one or two are going to try and latch on to him and try and get away with him. So, and which again just feeds into now they're going to try and leech onto him. It's all about leeching onto someone. Instead of just having friendships and having people who care about each other, it's about leeching on who you think you can get something from. Which, you know, again, is what the system's... And it's the sad part is that it feels like before, maybe there was a genuine friendship between Mario and Luigi that he put to the side so that he could maybe leech off of Joe. You know, it became more of a... Not a political play, but political in the sense of like his own politics rather than like a greater political thing, you know?
And I mean, it was also... We didn't talk too much about the romantic relationship because honestly, it wasn't really there. But he specifically pointed out that he had a date with his girlfriend at one point. She's all ready to go, and Joe tells him like, oh, I get it, all right, you want to spend time with her instead of me. No, I see how it is. And Mario recognizes that for some reason he is not allowed to leave. He has to follow Joe pretty much all the time, and it's only because Joe is taking it so hard that Mario reluctantly goes on a date with his girlfriend. And it's this idea of you are willing to give up all of these things that should be important to you, your romantic relationships, your friends, stuff like that, for the idea of this quote unquote better life. But then how much of a better life does it end up really being without them?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, which is where I was sort of going with the town being so happy at the end. Is like, and he never makes it back there. It's like, you know, the irony being that they're the one group of people who are going to care that he's not there. Yeah. They're going to weep for him. They're going to be sad that he's dead. So
I do feel kind of weird, though, the fact that the town gets the news that the 3 other men died in the same breath that Mario's coming back, and they all still choose to dance.
They can dance if they want to. They can leave their friends behind.
Well, this town sure dances. Because if they don't dance,
then they're no friends of mine.
Yep.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's an excellent movie because it has the character build up. It has its themes. It has, you know, it's got its commentary that it's clearly doing. But even if you're not even wanting to like think about that too much, and I think you should because it makes it richer and more of a rewarding experience. But just the actual action adventure part of the movie where they're traveling with this nitroglycerin and the problem solving, it's methodical. The direction when things go bad or when something might go bad is just, it's pitch perfect. It captures it so well where you're holding your breath because the movie's so quiet you feel like you should be quiet because if you breathe too loud it might blow up. Like, yeah, that's how you feel when you're watching some of those scenes, and it's excellent direction. And you know, and the characters, like I say, like they are not necessarily super likable. Mario is, you know, he drops friendships, relationships because he thinks someone can give him something. Joe as well, he has like a little racist comment about someone like quite early on in his time, and it's this idea that they look down on the people who are native to this location, like these, like, you know, people who live in this town that are from South America. They look down on them like we're better, we deserve to get away from here, unlike them. There's this kind of attitude that makes them all a little bit unlikable.
Well, I mean, based off of where they are, somewhere Central or South America, there is this idea that they all showed up here because of like colonialism, because of this, all these countries trying to expand their empires and whatnot back in the day. And it's only post-war that they're like, no, let's just go down there and we'll be able to live like kings because we are who we are. But
the point I'm getting at is that they are also a bad part of the system that are contributing to it as well as being a victim of it. And I think the harsh realities and the lessons they learn, it's not so much that they learn that they're part of the system by the end, because they don't really live long enough to have that recollection. But I think it adds some layers to it where they're not these perfect people, they're also victims and perpetrators of the system, and then ultimately meet their demise.
There was the part towards the very beginning, because Bimba works for the saloon owner. He works as like a driver for him, where he just walks in to Bimba and says like, hey, I need a drink, put it on my back wages. Turns out he's already gotten all these drinks on his back wages before, to the point where he's completely backed up. And he just tells the saloon owner, well, you're going to give me a raise. And the saloon's like, why? Because it's going to be hot. And it's just this feeling of almost like entitlement to all of them, where they feel they're owed this certain lifestyle that they haven't been given.
Yeah, absolutely. It's it. So yeah, it's presenting characters that aren't just these, like, you know, perfect little angels who are hard done by that you want to root for. It's more complex than that. They're real people in this real world that have faults and flaws and want a better life. Everyone deserves a better life than this, but you know, this system makes you need to work for it in ways that aren't fair. And
and one scene we kind of glossed over that I think sells this more than anything else as a overt theme rather than subtext is when the well blows up and news gets to town. Everyone's meeting, everyone's at this town meeting, and they just discuss on how awful this company has been to them and how many deaths of people they know have come out of it. And yet when they come around saying, hey, $2,000 for anyone willing to help us out, everyone jumps because it's $2,000, and that's more than they could possibly ever need at that point.
Again, it's the evil of capitalism, is the carrot and the stick and all that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So no, phenomenal film. Like, you know, I mean, admittedly, these first couple of Criterion movies, I've picked stuff that I knew I liked. So I mean, it was an easy thing for me. But part of the point of this show is to share good, important movies with people and expand and hopefully introduce people to some new types of cinema they're not used to.
Yep.
So, David, what are you rating The Wages of Fear out of 10?
So I do have to be honest in that the last shot, the last little sequence there, caught me so abruptly that it almost felt out of place. Like it felt like it wasn't a proper ending to this movie. But, I sat with that as long as I could before starting this review. And then we talked about it. And as I'm talking about it more, I'm more okay with it. I'm thinking it does fit it in what this movie was trying to do. Because again, this is a thriller. This is a suspense film. It builds up that tension and then releases it in a horrific, horrible way. And I don't think there's really any other way this movie could have ended. I think that it's a perfect little, because if he arrived back happy, it would just feel hollow. It would feel like it doesn't belong here.
I guess kind of what I said before, you could have ended it with him just falling in front of the fire and just, if it said Finn there, it would have worked as a sort of like bittersweet kind of ending. Like, because it would still have that feel of like, okay, he got there, but was it worth it? Was it worth everything he's done? And it would leave it on that question. Whereas the actual ending's even more kind of like soul crushing in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. But no, I think that it's a solid movie throughout. I think that you would probably get more out of it if you know that it's a thriller going into it. Unlike me, I did not know that going into it. So I was kind of just checking my watch for the first hour. Like, when are we going to get to the thing? Why is it Wages of Fear? Are we focusing more on the wages than we are the fear? But overall, I still can't really fault it. So I'm going to give this one a 9.5.
Damn. Above Seven Samurai.
Yeah, I think that this film was just a bit more, it just had the pacing right, I think is what it is. And for a thriller, that's super important. Whereas that was the one real critique I had with Seven Samurai, is that there were parts of it that just felt slow for slowness sake. Whereas this one just, while you could cut out character bits, it would ruin the movie to do so.
Yeah, I'm actually going to just give you the exact same score, 9.5 for me. It's it's a phenomenal film that just kind of blew me away, no pun intended, when I first saw it. And I very quickly saw his other most famous film very soon after, and that is what we'll be doing in about 6 months when we come back to Clouzot.
I look forward to it.
So look forward to Diabolique in about 6 months. Next time, though, next month, we have... What do we have next?
We have The Virgin Spring.
We do, yeah. We're going to Ingmar Bergman. And I've not seen this one, actually. So I have seen some Bergman, but I specifically, just so that to mix in some things that I haven't seen before up front, I thought I'll pick one that I've not seen. So
would it surprise you if I told you I have seen this one?
It would, yes.
Okay, well, you're not surprised then, because I have never
I didn't think you were going to tell me that.
Nope.
So that's what's coming up next month on Collector's Cut, the collection. Of course, you can get early access to the show on Patreon. You can also get bonuses. This is the opposite to a bonus show that we do called Extra Reels at the $5 tier on Patreon. So this is the criterion. This is the best of the best. We have a show monthly on Patreon that's the worst of the worst.
Yeah.
But so hopefully so worse that it's the best as well. So
it loops back around, the horseshoe theory.
Yeah, so we've not done the one that came out this month yet, but Sinbad and the Battle of the Dark Knights is the title of the film, so hopefully it was entertaining. I don't know. But we've done things like Miami Connection, we've done things like Dangerous Men, like just, these legendary so bad they're good B movies, and most of them do turn out to be so bad they're good. Not all, but most of them. Plus there's also a regular bonus episode that ties into the main show's theme for the month, for Collector's Cut at the $3 tier. So there's bonus content over in Patreon. You can get extra stuff. Also for other shows that we do as well, it Screams After Midnight and the Ace, you get bonuses for those. So go and have a look, see if you're interested. And anything is obviously supporting the content and keeping it coming. You can also support us for free by liking, subscribing, dinging the bell, sharing us on social media, stuff like that. All of it does help, so please do so. But that is the show pretty much. That is that's Collector's Cut, the collection. Thank you very much for joining us. We do appreciate it. Keep watching movies, and in the words of Martin Scorsese, this is cinema. Sure, it'd probably be good if you had some something in the glass at the end.
I was thirsty.